From time to time, in cycles that are becoming even shorter and more unpredictable, the trade winds from the southeast stop blowing. Without the break of the Peru current pushed by the trade winds, hot water advances towards the archipelago and causes a tragedy with effects that go beyond the ocean limits. The rise in the water temperature causes an impoverishment of the marine ecosystem because the nutrients that arrived with the cold waters from the south disappear. The fish leave, and as a result of all this, death and starvation reign over all the Galapagos. El Niño, as this phenomenon is known, damages the coasts of the archipelago to such an extent that it would seem impossible for them to recover. But if the Galapagos have shown us something, it is that their power to shelter life has no bounds. With the return of the cold waters rich in nutrients, the zoological communities are reborn and their previous population levels gradually return. It is as if the islands wanted to resume and remember their biological capacity, the same capacity that transformed these barren islets into the epitome of biological evolution that they have become, but in a timescale that is 5 million times faster. The El Niño phenomenon is not as damaging for all species. If truth be told, once it has passed, it leaves some positive results behind that should be set against the negative effects in an overall balance. After all, we are talking about a phenomenon which is as old as the islands themselves. While El Niño sows death along the coasts, it causes torrential downpours inland. Fresh water is a necessity in very short supply in the islands, so the rains have a positive effect in the long term. The vegetation grows spectacularly, the number of insects increases, and birds reproduce in an exceptional way. Just as the years of drought created terrible pressure on the natural selection of living creatures inland, the El Niño years do so on the coastal species. In this way, the Galapagos have set the patterns for the evolutionary formation of species for the 5 million years that they have existed, and they are still doing it. The islands are isolated from each other and from the continent, and this has turned Galapagos into a natural laboratory that is unique in the world. The species that flew here were transported by animals or floated on the sea, became isolated by the stretches of water that separate the islands, and thousands of years of evolution adapting to different environments transformed them, so they diversified and created different adaptive models. In no other place in the world can this be seen with such clarity, and it only needed the arrival of a man of open mind like Darwin for the theory of evolution to arise here, a theory which would transform the very pillars on which science was built. And the process is still going on. A strange paradox if we bear in mind that Darwin originally intended to confirm with his voyage the fixed truth of the book of Genesis from the Bible. In the different islands of the archipelago, it is not uncommon to find new experiments in this monumental laboratory. This is a hybrid iguana. Its father is a sea iguana and its mother is a land iguana. There are only two in the whole world. Perhaps the prototype may work because its range of foodstuffs is wider than that of each of its parents, and its hybrid physiology means it can operate both on land and in the sea. But, as with so many other hybrids, this experiment is sterile. To reach new species, a gradual evolution over thousands of years is necessary, in which the environment shapes the physiological changes out of pure natural pressure. The Galapagos Cormorant is a good example. Of the 29 species of cormorant that exist in the world, this is the only one that has lost its ability to fly. Here in the solitude of the archipelago, where there are no predators to escape from and the water offers a plentiful supply of food on the shore, flight is unnecessary for these cormorants. Or at least, not as necessary as the ability to swim to catch fish. So the cormorants that could swim the best ate more and raised more chicks. The result was the flightless Galapagos Cormorant, a cormorant whose wings slowly withered in order to acquire a more hydrodynamic body, to the extent that they also lost the keel of the sternum, the place where the powerful muscles necessary for flight come together. In exchange for its loss of flight, this cormorant became an excellent diver. While hunting, it rarely strays more than 100 meters from the coast and has no enemies on land, so it does not miss flying. During the breeding season, the cormorants are suspicious and aggressive to those they see as enemies for their chicks or possible competitors for food in their territorial waters. In spite of their difference in size, the bird's bad humor seems to persuade this sea lion that it would better to prowl on any other species of coast. While the sea lions are their main competitors for fish, the greatest risk for the cormorant's chicks comes from frigate birds. The frigates can catch newborn chicks from the air or steal the food from the hungry, impulsive infants that are too big to be preyed upon. Life in the sea or on islands where fresh water is short makes salt accumulation a problem. Most land-based vertebrates eliminate it through their kidneys, but 2 liters of urine would be necessary to excrete the salt content of just 1 liter of seawater, so those that ingest food and drink under the ocean waters have had to resort to more sophisticated systems. These flightless cormorants are getting rid of excess salt. They have special glands above their eyes that secrete a saline solution with a concentration of 5%. To prevent this secretion from falling into their eyes, they have a special duct which takes the drops to the tip of their beak, from which they fall in a constant drip. The sea iguanas have the same problem, but do not have a beak along which they can channel the salt excretion, so they have adopted a more efficient method. Their desalinating glands are the most effective of all reptiles. Like the cormorants, they are located above their eyes, but instead of the duct connecting with the beak, in iguanas it connects with the nasal orifices through which it ejects the salt by sneezing from time to time. This is why the sea iguana's head always appears with an uneven white helmet. The sayaba crabs also suffer from a diet with excess salt, which they have to eliminate. To do this, they have followed the iguana's method and have added an important improvement, namely jet propulsion. Salt is a double problem for the frigate birds. Not only must they excrete it like other seabirds, they must also get it out of their feathers. The frigate birds do not plunge themselves into the seawater. Only their beaks touch the water when they are fishing or when they steal what other birds have caught. The reason lies in the feathers themselves. The gland with which birds grease their feathers is very small in frigate birds, so if they landed on the sea, they would be soaked quickly and they would drown. But as they are constantly splashed with seawater, the frigate birds end up having to eliminate the salt deposited on their feathers. They do this by having a bath in fresh water. On the island of San Cristobal, the crater of an extinct volcano has provided a place for a lake. The frigate birds come here to desalinate, but they try not to immerse themselves completely in the water, and if they do, they have only a few seconds before their badly greased feathers are soaked and become too heavy for them to fly. A dispute between two females in reproductive phase ends up with one of them in the water. Its opponent knows that if it floats for too long on the water, it will drown, and so tries to prevent it from taking off. One last effort frees the female from the water. For frigate birds, desalination can be a risky business.